being here this morning. And I want to start off with a question. Okay, first of all, who loves being happy? Everybody in this room, everybody loves being happy. Okay, so you have to pick one of these two options, okay, that you think would make you happier. Which would you rather choose to make you happy? The first option, win the $20 million lottery. Pretty good. Option 2, encounter a life-altering injury. All right? So show of hands, I'm curious, who would choose the life-altering injury? Okay, we got one back there with Adam. All right, how about the $20 million lottery? Yeah, everybody, no-brainer, right? We would pick the $20 million lottery. Imagine all the things you could do with that money. You could get the house of your dreams, you could travel the world, you could eat at the 5-star restaurants that you want, or just be like me and just gorge yourself on Chipotle every single day, you know, because it's the best. There's so much you can do with that money. So why in the world would you possibly pick a life-altering injury that would probably immediately bring you down to the bottom of your life that you've ever lived? But what if I told you that it's actually scientifically proven that encountering a life-altering injury could actually grant you longer-term happiness than winning the lottery? You see, the pursuit of happiness is etched into our culture's DNA, isn't it? We live by this mantra that as long as you're happy, do whatever you want, do whatever you need to do to make you feel good. We love pleasure. We love it when everything is awesome. You know, Lego movie fans, right? We hate feeling bad. We love feeling good. And we will chase happiness at whatever the cost. And this is so much so, this is literally a part of the preamble to the Declaration of Independence that our founding fathers in this country wrote. They said this: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." It's right there, guys. And here's the most interesting part about our culture's, in our country's foundation, is that the founding fathers designed the United States to be an autarky. Ever heard of that political term? An autarky? An autarky is a government that's solely based off of self-reliance, independence, individual liberty, right? That the government doesn't control your life, you control your life. And with that, you shouldn't be limited in the things that you pursue for you to have happiness. And they even go as far to say that the Creator, our God, gave you the right to pursue that. And that's true to an extent. It's true to an extent. You see, while the freedom for us to pursue happiness makes for a great political ideology, it makes for a wonderful country, but let me tell you, it makes for absolutely terrible Christianity. Because where our founding fathers say that the pursuit of happiness is a right, our Heavenly Father says the pursuit of happiness is meaningless. It's meaningless. You got your Bibles, we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. So if you brought a physical Bible or if you've got a Bible app, you can open up to Ecclesiastes chapter 2. We'll start in verse 1. And there's this guy in the Old Testament by the name of King Solomon. Maybe you've heard his story before. King Solomon was going to become the next king of the people of Israel, and God showed up to him in a dream and said, "Solomon, ask me for whatever you want, and I will give you it." And Solomon could have asked for riches, he could have asked for fame, he could have asked for all the possessions he ever could have dreamed of, but instead, he asked God to give him wisdom. Wisdom. And the Lord was so satisfied with that answer that he gave Solomon all the fame, riches, and glory anyway. And for a while, Solomon lived his life as a righteous man, literally the wisest man to walk this earth, second to Jesus Christ himself. But then over time, the riches and the fame and the possessions, the happiness that he chased, all these things started to corrupt him. Started to corrode his life in God. And so we get to this book called Ecclesiastes, which is assumed that King Solomon wrote. It's his reflection coming out of him receiving literally everything he could have ever imagined, pursuing happiness to the T, but what that all actually means for our life. the implications of that. And I think you'll be really surprised to hear what King Solomon has to say in these words. So let's check it out in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. Read along with me if you have this. Here's what Solomon said. I said to myself, come on, let's try pleasure. Let's look for the good things in life. But I found that this too was meaningless. So I said, laughter is silly. What good does it do to seek pleasure? After much thought, I decided to cheer myself with wine. And while still seeking wisdom, I clutched at foolishness. In this way, I tried to experience the only happiness most people find during their belief in this world, their brief life in this world. I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect the water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. I bought slaves and servants, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the kings who had lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. So I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. And we're going to pause right there after verse 10. Just to sum up and get straight a little bit of what Solomon's saying, okay, just to summarize what we've heard so far. Wisest king to ever walk this earth. Had a lot of fun, laughed a lot, but eventually found that was pointless. So he got a little tipsy and decided, let's just chase the pleasure and the happiness that everybody else chases. So for him, that looked like building huge homes, literally owning his own orchards. He built man-made lakes and water systems to water those orchards and fields. Like, what insane person has that? He had slaves and servants to do whatever he wanted. He raised more livestock than any West River rancher could ever imagine. Let me tell you. He made stupid amounts of money. He had his own band perform for him. He had many concubines, which basically meant that he had as much sex as he ever wanted on a dime. Not only that, he had a lot of fame, and he loved the work that he did. He had a good job. That's the pursuit of happiness to a T, folks. That's practically living the American dream. Now, here's what he says in verse 11. But as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. Pursuit of happiness is meaningless. It's meaningless. You know, but one thing that does make me, I don't know about you, but this makes me incredibly happy, are hamsters. Fun fact about me, my favorite rodent of all time is the hamster. Hamsters are the best rodent, fight me on this, okay? They are the best hamster. In fact, I even remember as a junior high kid, like my favorite song was the hamster dance. Y'all remember that? You know, I don't know, junior high homecoming night, I literally only went, the first high school dance I ever went to was junior high prom. My second high school dance I went to was senior prom. So junior high homecoming, senior prom, I wasn't into dances. That's probably because I like the hamster dance, right? But one of the things I love about hamsters so much are those hamster wheels. You know what I'm talking about? Ever seen them where they just hop on these little hamster wheels and they just go, just for eternity, it seems like? In case you don't know what I'm talking about, let's just watch this really, really quick clip of hamsters on a hamster wheel. Check this out. See? Poor guy, just got going, kept going around and around and around and around. Yeah, let's watch this guy. See? Here he goes. Keep going. Yeah. Let's play it one more time. Come on. That was great, right? Let's just soak that up. He's going, then he trips up, and then, man, all you physics people, that's some good, what's the word? Circus, I can't remember. Ever feel like that? Do you ever feel like that? Where you have all these goals, you have all of these desires, all these things that you want to pursue, and you hop on it, and it just seems like you're on a hamster wheel, running your guts out. chasing all these things, and yet it seems like you're going nowhere. You're just running in place. Till finally you trip, and the wheel actually is spinning so ferociously that it just takes you around in the whirlwind of it until finally you slow down enough for gravity to bring you down and you crash on your face. That's a little bit of what the pursuit of happiness is like, according to Solomon. You know, I don't know where maybe some of you guys are at in your own pursuits of happiness and these other things just to try to make you feel good. Maybe it's getting the stuff. Maybe it's experimenting with drugs. Maybe it's trying to win approval from your peers, getting the grades. But it just seems like no matter how far you go, no matter what you achieve, it's only a matter of time until you become discontent, right? And this is what so many people do. They chase all these things, and once when they get the one thing, they have to find the next. So they go and they get the house, right? They hop on their hamster wheel, they get the loan, and that's good for a little while, and then they become discontent. So they hop back on their hamster wheel and they look for the new job. They become discontent. So they get back on the hamster wheel and they get the new gadget, they find the new girlfriend, they go to Chipotle over and over and over again because it's just so good and they can't get enough of it, right? It's this constant, never-ending circle. So finally you realize, just like Solomon, that as you looked at everything you had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless. Like chasing the wind, running in place. So if we make the pursuit of happiness our life motto, we're no better than a zealous rodent. You know, and this as long as you're happy philosophy that so guides our culture and our society to a T. Here's the irony of it. If you live by the as long as you're happy mentality, it's only a matter of time before you're not happy for long. As long as you're happy, you're not happy for long. But why? Why does that seem to be the case? Like, looking at Solomon and all these things that he reflected on, why would chasing happiness be something that just we're constantly spinning our gears over? Why are we wired that way? Well, it turns out that Solomon was actually well ahead of his time before moral psychologists came out and identified that this tendency for the things we chase that make us happy to never last is because of this thing called the adaptation principle, okay? The adaptation principle. You didn't know that you were going to get some psychology this morning. Here's what the adaptation principle means. It's that we adapt to any changes that happen to us in our life, okay? So no matter how big or how small those changes are, it could be receiving a present at a birthday party, it could be winning the lottery. Our brain loves change. It loves change because in that moment where we get something new or something changes in our life or we get something, we value that for an instant, but then over time, we adapt to that when the newness wears off. So it's not that we don't get any happier, it's just that we adapt to that as being a new part of our normal state of life, okay? So that means that our brains like life changes more than just staying stagnant with a normal state of life. It looks for these changes all the time. And that's very different than what we often think of the pursuit of happiness, okay? When we think of pursuing happiness, I have a couple of images and graphs that I drew out, so you're going to see my third grade handwriting here. Let's go ahead and throw up this first graph. This is what we tend to think the pursuit of happiness looks like. Constant up and to the right, where everything just keeps growing. And eventually, you'll have some dips that bring you down, and whenever we go through the dips in our life, those seem to be setbacks. We kind of treat our happiness like the stock market. Like we get really down when it starts going down, but we're super excited when everything else is going up, right? That's actually not how our brains process happiness, though. Instead, our brains process happiness like this graph, where you have this middle line that's this normal state of happiness. It's just your normal day-to-day. If nothing were to change, if nothing were to happen, that's your standard. But then you have the y-axis, where the further up you get, the better the change, the better the happiness that it brings you. But then the further down you get, the greater the catastrophe, okay? So, imagine with me, you win the lottery, $20 million. Boom. Here on graph 3, you see that immediate spike. You get so much life change right away. You get the new house, you get the car, you get the endless Chipotles, whatever it is for you, right? And things are really, really good for a moment. But then notice, over time, you start to adapt. The new car isn't so new anymore. The house isn't so new anymore. In fact, maybe you start finding that this starts bringing a couple of other troubles. You know, like you had such a huge rush of new that was so great on the front end that then, when this becomes your new state of normal, what you need to spike your happiness is something that compares to the $20 million that you just won. A once-in-a-lifetime thing. So over the long run, you actually become more discontent when you're looking at it from a time standpoint. See that? So now, what if you received a life-altering injury? Maybe you know of people or have heard stories of crazy, devastating things. And it doesn't just have to be a life-altering injury. Any sort of a life event that dramatically changes your life. Catastrophe, right? You hit rock bottom in so many ways. And it's in those catastrophes we have to rethink some of our friendships. We have to rethink our jobs. We have to rethink how we even view the world. Maybe we even have to rethink who God is. Why would God even allow me to go through that dip? Why couldn't he have just given me the money instead? Right? And so it's actually in these dips then, because we're so down, we're so depressed, we're so devastated, we actually chase all the other things. We chase the money, we chase the drugs, we chase the relationships that are completely meaningless, and all of this other stuff to try to get us back up there just to numb us in the pain, but really it just gets us to cycling downwards, right? But notice, this is where the adaptation principle kicks in. When we hit rock bottom, there's nowhere else to go but up. See? There's nowhere else to go but up. So if you go through the life-altering injury, you move from a hospital bed to a wheelchair. And then you slowly get to regain and learn how to eat again. And you go and you interview for other jobs, and you find a new job that works with your injury, and you get to, you slowly and surely, it is not easy by any means. But notice, you're constantly moving up. You're constantly making progress because you're constantly overcoming obstacles. And here's the interesting part. And let's go ahead and go to this last graph, Micah. Your brain doesn't live for what gives you the spike. It just lives for the progress. It lives for the progress. And though you might get a huge spike on the front end with a $20 million thing, it's actually overcoming life's obstacles over the long term that allows us to feel greater satisfaction in our life. Because we were taken somewhere and we became someone that we never even dreamed of becoming. And here's what we find is that happiness is never found in achievement but progression. Psychologists actually call this the progression principle. We adapt to all of our normal life circumstances that are thrown at us and that our brain is wired to overcome things, to take a step forward. So the reason why happiness is meaningless is because the pursuit of happiness is actually found in the pursuit, not the achievement. It's found in the pursuit, not the achievement. So what does this all have to do with happiness? Because here's the greater question. Is there something we can chase that gives us a fulfilling joy, even though it can never possibly be achieved? There is. It just happens to be called the pursuit of holiness. The pursuit of holiness. Jesus, in one of his most startling statements and teachings ever, told this to his disciples in Matthew 5:48, but you are to be perfect, even as your heavenly Father is perfect. In other words, be holy as God is holy. Like, that is insane to think about, isn't it? Especially when you consider, of all the words that we use to describe God, holiness is the one that encapsulates all of it. Holiness is the word that sums up God's character, his goodness, his justice, his mourning, his caring, his patience, his anger, his righteous anger, his power, his omnipotence, his presence everywhere. Holiness is the thing that describes how he is completely set apart from everything we understand to be. Jesus is saying to be that. Like what? And when we read a statement like that, we freak out because there's no way we can achieve that. You see? Because we view so much of the stuff that we chase as something that we can eventually achieve. We can never achieve perfection. We can never achieve complete holiness. So what's even the point of becoming like God if we're never going to get there? Right? But that's the whole point. You see, holiness, this is the thing that we need to get. Holiness isn't a goal you achieve. It's a God you pursue. Holiness isn't a goal you achieve. It's a God you pursue. It is a constant, eternal journey of progression. The theologian John Oswalt says this in his book, Called to be Holy. This is such a beautiful summary of what it means to be holy. Here's what it says. To have a perfect heart, to be holy toward God, is to obey his covenant stipulations, is to make him the absolute Lord of our lives, to submit to his will, to call sin what he calls sin, to call righteousness what he calls righteous, and to view people as he views people. Being wholeheartedly God's has much less to do with how we feel about God than it does with him, letting him slash out of our lives everything which stands as a rival to him, so that he can fill our lives with himself and transform the very way we imagine reality. That sounds pretty rad, if you ask me. The eternal pursuit of holiness is a constant journey of progression to Christ-likeness, just like the progress principle. And when you think about how you chase God, every single step forward is an act of growing in him, right? That new habit that he's calling us out to do, that person that he wants us to become. Maybe it's to become a little less easily angered. Maybe he wants us to heal a relationship with a parent. Maybe he wants us to take all these little steps to becoming how he has wired us to. And it's a journey that will literally last eternity. And at the end of the day, the pursuit of happiness is found in pursuing an infinite God of immeasurable goodness who brings an incomprehensible joy to us for eternity. Nothing can satisfy us the way that God can. Nothing can. Nothing can. And here's the craziest part for me, is that what seems like a step backwards in our happiness can actually be the greatest step forward in our holiness. And this makes no sense. That when you go through life's hardships, those kinds of moments are often the refining experiences that shape us into who God wired us to be. It's pushing us through and persevering through these hardships to be resilient, that literally forms us to be stronger, to have a larger perspective of life, to lean into other friendships than our weakness, to build us up, so that even when we are down in the dumps, our God is still good, and his joy is still worth pursuing. Because he doesn't just give us a happiness, he gives us a joy that completely surpasses all. So in our time remaining, I'm going to invite Mason and Shelby to come back up here. We're going to close out with just a couple of songs. And I don't know what hardships or uncertainties or things you're going through right now, okay? But maybe you look at your life and the things that you're chasing, and you're like, man, this just isn't cutting it. This isn't cutting it. Let this morning be a reset for you. And I don't know if that just means like just take some time in your seat in prayer. Maybe that's standing in worship. Maybe you just need to find a corner and you just need to sit down and just curl up with God, Just asking him to fill you up and to help you with this. Whether it's a meaningless pursuit of something that's been unfulfilling for the longest time, or because you're going through grief or a hardship that you just could never have imagined. Or maybe you just moved to college and there is just so much going on and you feel so overwhelmed. God is here. He sees you. He lives for the dips because he loves being able to be there with us to strengthen us through it. So I'm just going to pray. I'll just close us out in worship. Holy Father in heaven, you are so good. Even when life is not good. God, you are good even when there is nothing good about the things that we're going through, because you have such an eternal purpose in mind. You are not only here with us in the hardships, but you're already there in the situations that help us overcome it. God, you've already seen us through it. God, you've already made us into the person that you're forming us to be. May we just respond with obedience. May we respond with a surrender to the things that you have in store. Holy God, we apologize for the things we chase that are just so fleeting. And recenter us to help us learn what it means to chase a God that is never ending, where we can find a never-ending amount of joy and pleasure just in knowing who you are. Lord, may this time of worship be honoring and glorying and pleasing to you. Show us what you want.